Game development can be a very grueling process, whether you're stringing if statements together or working on games that are actual masterpieces. Pro or indie, these game studios all fear one thing: piracy. Plainly put, if a game they put so much work into gets pirated, then that's lost money for them. To try and prevent this, game studios have implemented their own versions of anti-pirate security, coming in the form of warnings, error screens, and even sabotaging the pirate's experience. The added consequence of these measures, though, were that people started to take greater interest in them than intended, leading people to create their own urban legends and creepypastas around these screens. And further than that, an actual meme format was formed. But it wasn't always like this, and I'm here to retrospectively look at the legacy of anti-piracy screens. The real, the fake, and also the absolutely unserious. On the topic of piracy, data breaches happen left and right on the internet, letting data brokers steal and sell our data. All that spam you probably get nowadays is probably a result of data brokers selling your info. But luckily, I have this video sponsor, Aura. Aura is a service that scours the internet for your personal information and gets it taken off data broker lists for you. This tool has been instrumental in removing spam I get, and their VPN tool has been a lifesaver when researching topics outside my country for other videos. Aura helps keep my data away from any bad actors looking to do anything unsavory. Online privacy is important to me, and it probably is to you too, which is why my link, aura.com/woodcat, is in the description, where you can start your 2-week free trial today and see who's selling your data. As personal computers started becoming household and widespread in the late 70s and the early 80s, a whole new world of gaming opened up. Now anyone could boot up the living room computer and play something that just a few years earlier would have required an arcade, or another far less accessible medium. With that freedom came a problem though. Copying software was surprisingly easy. As soon as games were put on floppy disks and cartridges, piracy came into the scene, which stood to undermine the work of developers and profits of companies. Which I must now strategically disavow piracy, since promoting crimes is against TOS, but boy do I love some homebrew in the morning. Anyways, in response to this rise in piracy, game companies were struggling to fight back. At first, the solutions were pretty straightforward. Some games required players to reference words in a physical manual, while others demanded a spin of a code wheel to progress. One of the first and most primitive ways of enforcing anti-piracy was the manual keyword lookup. Manual protection sounded good on paper. Get it? Because the manuals are made of paper? But there was a simple way to circumvent the practice: photocopying the manual. It was really easy to pirate the manual and therefore pirate the game, so that practice was short-lived. This would be impossible to enforce nowadays, of course, with every manual being in some PDF online. The next idea was to implement something called code wheels, which were also comparatively primitive. These devices could be spun to make a variety of permutations, which made it a lot harder to copy outright. It was easy to scoot around this one too though, because the code wheels were made of individual pieces that could just be copied and given out. At a certain point, this came to be an even worse method, since the amount of possible keys given by a code wheel was far lower than a manual could ever have. Studios retreated to manual protection, but using colors instead, as color copying was far less commercially available or accessible at the time. These early anti-piracy protocols were more about keeping honest players honest than punishing anyone. However, they did set the stage for something larger as game technology evolved. These games could themselves be the gatekeepers. Everyone seemed to follow suit in the 90s, and if you'll allow it, I can finally talk about the anti-piracy happenings themselves instead of the technological aspect. After all, the games wouldn't really do anything interesting if you didn't have a code. It just wouldn't let you in, and that's it. Some of the most famous anti-piracy measures yet were conjured up when games started checking themselves for piracy and finding it, false positive or not. Now, for the rest of the segment, I get to do the SpongeBob roller coaster gif over anti-piracy measures, because I don't find them necessarily that scary, but hey, they might scare me as a kid or others that age when they're just trying to play a game at night. Starting things off is the game Earthbound, which is actually pretty forgiving to players, with some probably never encountering it on their pirated copies. I say this because the game functions in normal up until the very end, where the game insists that you reset. Upon booting the game back up though, all your data is gone. Malicious, but this measure assumes that the player would ever play enough to hit the end of the game. I remember barely ever playing to completion the games I had as a kid, but if I did, I would certainly be distraught if I hit an error screen which proceeded to delete everything. Some more anti-piracy screens that get all the subtle uncanniness of an error upon trying to use a pirated copy can be found in Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3. These are very simple. The screen in the sequel entails Diddy and Dixie Kong sitting in jail along with text that says, "An irregularity has been detected. Please turn the power off. Wait for 10 seconds, then turn the power on again." Which is a warning that's given when the game suspects a false positive could have just been tripped and is sincerely just an irregularity. Upon resetting, if the anti-piracy check is tripped again though, the text changes to, "This product will not operate when connected to a device which makes unauthorized copies. Please refer to your instruction booklet for further information." And that's a far more condemning message, accusing the player of having an unauthorized copy of the game, which in its execution could come off as more than an error but also a warning to those playing. The third game has the exact same methodology when it gives its error screens. The only difference is that the background image is now Kiddy and Dixie Kong in a crib, which makes sense given these are just the game over screens to their respective games. Whichever one a player would play, the message about an irregularity and then an accusatory message about unauthorized copies would surely freak out any youngin' trying to cheekily copy Donkey Kong. Moving on to the less subtle though is Spyro Year of the Dragon, which if any of you know a slight little bit about this topic, then you've heard about this game a million times. What I really want to focus on though is the announcement that the game makes that you've done something illegal.
I'm sorry, Spyro, but you seem to be playing a hacked version of this game. This may be an illegal copy. Since this copy has been modified, you may experience problems that would not occur on a legal copy.
It straightforwardly just tells you through a character that you're on a hacked and possibly illegal copy of the game, just plainly. No whimsical background music either. The odd silence is one that is unaccustomed to in this screen, and it really sets the mood in telling you that this is no laughing matter. I really think about the fact that if I were a kid and all of a sudden this fairy told me I'd done something illegal, breaking the fourth wall, implying I'd go to jail, I would just never open the game again. These are what the real anti-piracy screens tend to be like. The ones that have a menacing aura to them even though the contents easily fit into the age rating of the game. The game proceeds to sabotage your run-through, of course, randomly changing languages, randomly deleting progress you've made, disabling in-game features, weakening your character, and just crashing altogether. If you do get to the end, then an attempt to fight the final boss will have you met with the deletion of your game file, sending you right back to the beginning with nothing. If the game didn't dissuade you from playing with any of those other sabotages, then the deletion of your game might do enough to push you over the edge. Any kid playing the pirated version would probably tread carefully after just the warning, but if they didn't tread carefully after that, they were sure to after the game became just unplayable. Another widely known punishment in the anti-piracy scene is in a game known as Michael Jackson The Experience for the Nintendo DS. The game checks if a legitimate copy is being played or not, then we get treated to the sound of a bunch of vuvuzelas blaring over the intended in-game audio, serving an annoying experience to those trying to play, or even an unnerving experience to the younger few who would just want to play some Michael Jackson. The game is of course soft-locked here, because any progression is impossible without the sound and mechanics that allow gameplay. A combination of early yet intentionally frightening anti-piracy errors comes in the form of the game La Abadía del Crimen. If the game's checks show that the copy has been pirated, then during a praying sequence where one would expect to hear a rendition of Ave Maria, this plays. This would definitely scare someone just trying to pray if they were on the more sensitive side, not a condemnation of anyone, just an observation. The descending tones of the voice, the silence, the consequent crashing of the game, it's really the kind of thing that's so out there and subtle that you'd be forgiven for mistaking it for one of those anti-piracy screen mock-ups popular in 2020. Speaking of which, it really is the combination of subtle dread and outright punishment that made these anti-piracy measures memorable. Some of the screens sneak up on you like Earthbound, quietly waiting on you until the very end to delete your save, while others, like La Abadía del Crimen, just scream at you. Whether subtle or unsubtle, these moments share a common thread. They made the game feel like they're breaking the fourth wall, like they're watching you and capable of judging your actions, casting a moral weight on you. And it's exactly that energy that inspired a whole wave of fake anti-piracy screens online. In 2020 and 2021, people started creating mock-ups for games like Mario Party DS, Pokemon, and Super Mario 64. These fakes thrived because the originals had already conditioned players to feel that pause, that unease that a game could turn on you. In other words, the real anti-piracy screens laid the groundwork for an internet trend built on fake warnings, eerie text, and uncanny error screens. One of the examples, the one that kickstarted the trend of these memes that started at the tail end of 2020, is a mock-up of what an anti-piracy screen might look like in Mario Party DS. Mario Party DS doesn't have any actual anti-piracy measures in place, so this was mostly a fan-made creation. I'll of course show it to you here. I remember watching this video back when it came out and being so enthralled with it. I grew up playing Mario Party DS and to this day maintain it's one of the best renditions of Mario Party. So naturally, seeing it in such a different light was such a whiplash. The clip is a little on the nose with lines like, "There's nothing you can do before the mole kills Luigi." But given how real games I showed before were fine with doing wild messaging with the game audio and all that, I found this to be entirely plausible. Plus, at the time, there was no trend to really make lines like that just commonplace in memes. I even wanted to make this video about it when I had a different channel back then. May that channel rest in peace. The reason I gush about this game in particular is that because it started a whole trend of people making different creepy anti-piracy screens that, for better or for worse, explored the concept of these games they grew up with turning on them. For instance, we have this screen of New Super Mario Bros., also for the DS. It's simple. It reuses game over assets, it doesn't try too hard to scare the audience, instead imploring them to put themselves in the shoes of a kid who would encounter this. It contains a boilerplate message about piracy, and it would just serve as a warning not to pirate games, or there could be consequences. I could go through purely Mario examples for hours, like this famous one of Mario Kart Wii that kills Mario with the Wario apparition, which is less believable, but isn't so egregiously over the top in its execution that I can hate on it that bad. The trend obviously wasn't exclusive to Mario. Here we have an anti-piracy screen for Animal Crossing, where Rossetti lambasts the player for being a pirate, and then hits us with a piracy is no party-esque screen. A very simple screen, and it just lays out the groundwork of why you wouldn't want to do piracy to begin with, paired with an image of a villager in jail. We even got Sonic Adventure with a fan-made anti-piracy screen which just glitches to when the game is triggered. So many of these anti-piracy screens seem to just have a formula to them. They have a setup of some gameplay, then the game glitches or lambasts the player, which is then followed by a screen that the player is soft-locked on, telling them that what they've done is illegal. It was a pretty cool trend in my opinion, and this isn't one of those rise and fall videos, but, I don't want to just put on the red tinted glasses and say that everyone was amazing at it, because obviously not everyone was perfect. For instance, we have this Super Mario Odyssey anti-piracy screen which plays the Nintendo Wii error screen, which is already a little immersion breaking, but then it cuts to the scary screen, which shows creepypasta Mario with a cleaver along with text about piracy being a crime. Other Mario creepypasta images come on screen and it ends with a graphic of Mario being hanged. The song playing in the background doesn't really fit into the Mario universe either, or really sound like a song that ever play in a Mario game, save for that one River Twigs Bed Paper Mario song that gets used in every Iceberg video. And I don't bring this up to hate, but I need to escape the comments that are going to claim that not all these are good, even if the ones that got a lot of attention tended to be the ones that were the most well done. This trend brought out a lot of ways for these games to transition into their own piracy is no party-esque screen. I can't necessarily call them creative, since most of them are just game glitches, then screen of character or characters plural in jail, along with an eerie song in the style of the game or just sourced from the game. I don't find myself hating though. I think the idea of a game unintentionally being scary while protecting itself made for some good soft digital horror, tapping into the fear that one might have felt as a kid when they stumbled upon real screens. Many of us might have played these games at the same age, which might bring thoughts of, what if I encountered this when I was that age? And given how plausible some of these screens looked, I wouldn't blame someone for looking at these and being filled with dread at the thought of encountering these at such a young age when they would have been playing. Stuff like Super Mario Odyssey Anti-Piracy is still fun. I still imagine if it were real and I were 13 and saw that screen. To be honest, I'm still trying to figure out whether that would have creeped me out or whether I would have just laughed, but it's not too believable, so why give too much thought to that? Mario Party DS Anti-Piracy would have had 6-year-old me never play it again, that's for sure. What I know I would have never seen at such a young age is all the obvious piss takes on the subgenre of internet content that I can have a good laugh at. These videos were not made to be scary, and are pretty funny in that they make fun of a subgenre that admittedly got rather saturated. Stuff like Rod Wave Anti-Piracy shows what I'm talking about perfectly. It goes through the exact rhythms of some of the more derivative pieces, with Rod Wave glitching and then an anti-piracy screen about serious crime, along with a picture of the rapper. It then goes to a second screen with a really unserious, scary Rod Wave picture. The choices for the soundtrack to this video were obviously inspired by the Mr. Incredible becoming uncanny meme. Kendrick Lamar Anti-Piracy is also pretty good. I can summarize it in the exact same way as the Rod Wave video, except the audio for the error screen segment is the exact same. The only difference is that it's Kendrick Lamar instead of Rod Wave, two different rappers. I could go on about how this isn't scary, but obviously it wasn't meant to be unless you're like Drake or something. Memes like these became a thing in more recent years, and I take them to be some meme makers looking back on an anti-piracy screen trend from a few years back and deciding to do the classic thing where people make fun of something that is past its peak popularity. I don't think these are done in the same scathing way as internet people will pretend that they never liked something that was just really popular. But these memes are definitely done in a way that says, wow, those were kind of silly, weren't they? I find Rod Wave and Kendrick Lamar Anti-Piracy funny because I can tell that they're like a mic drop on the genre, and they're not an effortless attempt to be seen as part of the genre for clicks, you know? I definitely did an amazing job of how I could tell that Diddy Analog Horror was not a mic drop on Analog Horror last video. Like, yep, definitely got no complaints about that. But in short, those people did nothing to indicate those videos were satire, and having uploaded sincere attempts to be analog horror alongside their Diddy videos, they can only be reasonably assumed to be sincere, or at least a shit post that they're not taking all too seriously along with the rest of the genre. And boom, that's why I don't like Diddy Analog Horror, and that's an explanation that I could have stretched to 18 minutes another time, done in a single sentence. I wanted to talk about these anti-piracy screens because they were a massive obsession for me at the end of 2020. I always found game development to be an interesting process, even if I never be able to do it for the life of me. The intention was to explain why we even have these screens and to go over some of the most prolific anti-piracy sabotage and to draw the line as to why the original wave of fake videos played off of those so well. And I hope I managed to do that. I find it cool when people want to create and put stuff they like into the trends they follow. Of course, some fandoms can be more egregious with it and can be rather annoying, but I digress. I have been John X Woodcat, and I'll see you in the next video.